My name is Amanda Pfeiffer. I'm an education coordinator at the Canadian Light Source. Welcome to another video where we are interviewing different staff members across the facility and talk about their career paths. Before we get to that though, I would like to acknowledge that the Canadian Light Source, which is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, is located on Treaty 6 land in the traditional territories of the Nahiwak, Anishinaabe, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota nations, and the homeland of Métis. As educators, we respect Indigenous ways of knowing and oral traditions. And through our various partnerships and relationships that we form, we hope to move forward in a spirit of partnership, reconciliation, and collaboration. And we encourage you to think about your own relationship to Indigenous peoples in the land. So with that, I would like to introduce Jesse, who actually worked at the facility in the previous summers before. So Jesse, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself further. Tell us what you did at the facility then and what you currently do now.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Jesse Parenteau. I worked with the Canadian Light Source for the past 2 summers. So now it's 2021. So I was there the summer of 2020 and 2019. I was the education assistant, which meant that I helped the education team. And now I am currently a teacher, teaching high school and middle years, seniors in maths down in Southeast Cornerstone Public School Division in Saskatchewan.
Cool. So going back to what you did for us when you were working at CLS, can you tell us what your job was as an education assistant? What were some of the things that you did?
Right. So as the education assistant, like I said, I helped the education team basically give and develop inquiry-based programs that were often used for high school students and high school teachers. And this could have ranged from assisting directly with delivering the programs and helping out students use the facility of the Canadian Light Source, or behind the scenes working on some of the documents and programming and stuff like that that were going to be used in future sessions with students and high school teachers, all the way up to helping develop the professional development that the education team delivers and offers to teachers across Canada and actually now across the globe while it was virtually.
I'd say interesting, but I was there and I know all this stuff, so hopefully other audience finds it interesting. And yeah, you started at the same time that I started, and I was wondering if you could share, so this wasn't your first experience with the education team, you had other experience more so as a student working with the education team and Synchrotron. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was involved with a class. I was in a chemistry class. It was Chemistry 398 at the University of Saskatchewan. And there was kind of a joint class offered. It was a special project style course offered for both chemistry and medieval Renaissance studies students. And so we worked with the Canadian Light Source was one. So Tracy Walker was one of our professors, I guess, for the course, or deliver educator for the course. We also had a professor from both the archaeology medieval Renaissance side and from the chemistry side. And we had to work together as a team to do this interdisciplinary study in which we looked at different artifacts from the Museum of Antiquities in Saskatoon at the U of S. And we actually put them in the beamline and hit them with x-rays and studied them that way. And we had to develop our own scientific inquiry process, why we were doing it, what we were doing. And yeah, with the help of the Canadian Light Source, we were able to do some really cool things that way. And so that was my first interaction with the Canadian Light Source and the staff members there.
Cool. So kind of on the same topic, what is your background like in education? Like what degrees or training have you had?
Right, so now I currently have completed, I was working at the time while I was doing the CLS, working towards them, but a Bachelor of Education, focusing in secondary science and math education. And now I also have a Bachelor of Science 3-year degree in chemistry.
So thinking even further back to high school, what were some of the classes that you took that applied to, I guess when you were working at the facility, or I guess applying now as a teacher?
Right. So back in the day, I was a little bit older than some of the students now in high school, but back then the curriculum had your three basic sciences, physics, chemistry, and bio, both at the 20 level or the grade 11 level and at the 30 level. Obviously now for any students watching, they have the physical science, earth science, health science for the grade 11, still keeping physics 30, chem 30, bio 30 for the grade 12. So back then I used a lot of the stuff that I learned from chemistry 20, chemistry 30, physics 20, physics 30, and even as far back as like science 10 when we started to first look at the atom and stuff like that, and how chemistry really works. Is what we used a lot of at the Canadian Light Source. And so we learned the basics of it, but then we learned how to apply that even further once I got to post-secondary. And so at the CLS, we used a lot of the concepts that I used, but really saw the real world application of it, because you often hear, okay, this is the topic, this is what you do, this is how you learn it, that's great. But it's hard to visualize how to use that in the future. So seeing that was really cool. And then obviously now as a teacher, I'm teaching the material. So I'm teaching the exact same things that I learned back in the day, just in different courses and different curricula used now.
Interesting how you definitely can say to your students that, well, I use this, what I taught in your classes, that you use it today. So I know not every student ends up being a teacher, but it's nice when those loops actually are complete and work out.
Absolutely.
You're also a Métis man, and I was wondering if you could share with us, how does that perspective, or what kind of knowledge does that bring when you're looking at these different areas in science and different classes?
Right. So as a Métis man, my family, I wasn't raised in a more traditional setting that a lot of Indigenous people are. We were told, and I was told as a kid, you know, we go to school, we do what the school tells us to do, we learn what the school tells us to learn, and this is how you get a good footing in life, this is how you get a good placement in life, and that's how just the world and society works. Now, growing up, and especially going to the U of S and the time that I did, and like a time of reconciliation across Canada, but specifically working with the CLS and working with Bernie Petit in the Indigenous application side of the Canadian Light Source, it was really important to see that that's not the case, or it should not be the case anymore. And so using the traditional knowledge that people have is important. I like to think like there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to, I don't skin cats, but there's more than one way to solve life problems, right? And you teach that in school. They learn, you know, this, you can solve a math problem this way. You can solve a chemistry problem this way, but you can extend that even further into life. And there's life problems, and not everything you learn in school in a traditional setting using Western science is going to be the answer. You can get to the same answer using traditional knowledge, and that just gives you a different insight and different perspective into it. And that's what I really like, because you are looking at the same thing, you're looking at the science of something, but from two sides of the same coin. You're looking either from like a Western science perspective, where we scientists tend to overanalyze things until you absolutely can't analyze things any even further, and then it just really hurts your head after a while. Or from a traditional standpoint, where you start to get a deeper meaning behind what you're looking at. And I think that that's just really important. So like I said, I didn't necessarily have that as a kid, but having the experiences at the CLS and the U of S, and even just in general life, is really important now, especially being a teacher where I have Indigenous students. And it's nice to know that I'm not going to be like that person saying, this is how you do it. That they have their perspectives, they have their histories, they have their background, their own personal knowledge from an Indigenous perspective that is valid, and it's good to have, and I want to encourage that. So yeah.
Wow, that is a really good answer, and you bring up a lot of really good points. And yeah, hopefully any students watching this can consider what you just said there. So there's a lot of good points there. Switching gears, so thinking back to working at the facility, were there any hazards or safety concerns that you encountered, and how did you handle those?
Working at the facility itself, found that there were very few hazards. I know, obviously, you working there, but for those watching this video, the CLS is all about safety, completely about safety, and safety is #1 top priority. And each safety mechanism has a safety mechanism in case that first safety mechanism fails. And then there's a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth safety mechanism in case all those previous ones fail. So it's actually really difficult at the CLS to get into a hazardous situation because of all the procedures and all the safety steps that are taken into account. So I can't honestly off the top of my head think of something, especially with the education team. I was lucky enough that we didn't really handle anything that was super hazardous and complex. We had a few things that students would work on that had maybe some fertilizers in it that were toxic, but just like a general safety in the lab, you wear your gloves, you wash your hands, you wear your masks, or not masks, sorry, goggles. I'm thinking too much about COVID. Wear your goggles, wear your safety coats, all that kind of stuff, and then you're fine. So it was just all the safety procedures that are in place makes it so that there are no hazards, I don't think.
And I would definitely agree with that. And it's funny that you mentioned the safety is a top priority, because I've said that in any video that I have done here. So it has been passed on. Excellent. Similar question. Did you find that your field of work, again, at the CLS, or you can talk about even what you're doing now as a teacher, did you find it stressful, and how did you handle that stress, both professionally and personally?
Yeah, at the CLS, as with any job, there's stress when it comes to just having multiple things on the go at the time. And it just comes down to prioritizing what I can and figuring out this is what I need by this time. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And figuring that all out and just kind of coming up with a plan. And Tracy was also very good at getting me personally to realize that not everything needs to be perfect. And I will say that now. At the time, it was a little bit difficult to say, but not everything needs to be perfect. And so that was accepting that too, is that I created the work to the best of my ability, and that's all that I could do. As a teacher, I'm sure any teacher watching this with their students, or any teacher watching this for their own interests, know that it's chaotic in the first couple of years. Like I said, this is my first year teaching, and it is a global COVID-19 pandemic. And so your first year teaching is, like I said, chaotic to begin with, and now add a pandemic to it. It's been an adventure. But again, just knowing what I can and cannot do, doing the best that I can, prioritizing things, doing like a mental checklist in my head, but also having support systems in both the CLS. I had great coworkers that you could always go for your coffee time and just have a good laugh to de-stress. Same thing at work. You can have your friends that you go to afterwards to just de-stress and say, oh, what a day. Or go to them and say, I know you've had this student right now. I'm struggling with this. What can I do? And just having the support system to really bounce things off. That is a huge help for both my job at the CLS and as a teacher.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point that you brought up about not always doing things to perfection. I think that's an important thing for students to think about, is taking a moment to realize what your own expectations are and consider, are those the same expectations that have been placed on you? And that goes not just for students, but for teachers as well. And yeah, kudos to you for surviving first year teaching in a pandemic, and any teachers watching too, because that is remarkable to say the least. So what did you enjoy about your position at CLS?
Um, I enjoyed quite a few things. First thing being, I'm a science nerd. I mean, you don't go into being a science teacher with a second science degree in chemistry unless you're a little bit of a nerd. So working with a really big, top-notch science facility where scientists from all over the world come to do actual cutting-edge research that can change the world, and I also got to use the same machine that they use, is incredible. And then working there, seeing high school kids using the same machine that worldwide scientists are using to do cutting edge science was incredible. And then from the teaching side of things, too, at the CLS, just helping the students go through the scientific process. And it took me quite a while, and even in my post-secondary education, until I started taking those upper years courses that really made you realize that not all science has an end point or goal or answer. And getting high school kids to realize that now is really cool to see. Even when I brought my class to participate in one of your programs there, the kids were asking, well, what's the answer? And I'm trying to break that because in that situation, there was no true answer, and that's okay. That's science. It's a process. And so getting to see kids work through that and finally realize that, oh, okay, science isn't all about getting the right answer. That was really cool to see.
Yeah, that kind of connects to your comment about stress for teachers, because it made me think of like inquiry. Like true inquiry does follow that research process. And like you said, breaking that kids from that idea that the culture of right, as Tracy likes to call it, is very, really important to do, especially at the age that they're at. They can be more critical thinkers as they develop. So that is a really good point that you brought up. Can you share with us any favorite experience that you had at CLS?
Oh, favorite experience. My ultimate favorite would honestly be when I was a student using it, because at that point it was all new. So it was the big new shiny thing, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is really cool. And so getting to use it for my own science inquiry was something that was really awesome. And then, not to get me wrong, using it with high school kids as well was really cool. But in that sense, my role changed. I wasn't learning about the big new shiny thing. I was helping others learn about the big new shiny thing. But my favorite was definitely using it for the first time and seeing it and going, oh, wow. It's an oh, wow factor.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so kind of wrapping up here, is there any words of advice that you would give to high school students when they're thinking about their career?
The biggest advice that I can give to any student, and I've given to multiple of my students here, is to, as cheesy as it sounds, follow your heart. I graduated school and I was unsure of what I wanted to do. So I guess it's a two-part advice. Follow your heart, and it's okay to be unsure. So when I graduated high school, I was unsure, and I was really good at math and science. So I went to a guidance counselor to see like what are my options, and I was told that I would be really good at engineering. And I was like, that makes sense. I love math. I love science. I love figuring things out and building things and solving things. Then I got to engineering, and that was an eye opener, let's say. And I realized real fast that I didn't want to do engineering. I wasn't really cut out for that. I wasn't as interested as I thought I was going to be. It was something that I was like, oh, that's neat, but. And so I bounced around in university for a couple of years, just in arts and science, taking general courses that could apply to multiple things, trying to find something that I was really passionate about. And I took 3 years off of university. And at the time, I felt like while I was a dropout of university, while all my friends were graduating and starting their careers, but I got to live a bit of life there too and experience different experiences. And I realized afterwards that was okay too. And it wasn't until I went to apply for a job as a math tutor once, and part of the job process was to actually help students on the floor, like part of the application process, because I had to help students on the floor. And I remember helping this one little girl. She was working on, I think, grade 1 or grade 2 math, and she was counting robots. And I helped her count robots. And some were shaded and some weren't shaded. So I was working on, well, how many are shaded out of the total? And seeing her light up, getting the answer correct, and she's like, this makes sense, was just such an experience that I'm like, okay, I want to be a teacher. And so, yeah, it took me a while to find that passion. And now I do feel that I'm quite passionate about educating students. And that's okay. That's okay to take time to actually figure out what you think is your passion. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes you're unsure, and sometimes you find it later, and no path is right or wrong. It will lead you to where it leads you in the end anyway. And so just go with the flow and see what you like, and don't try to live up to expectations that you are unsure of.
Wow, that's like fortune cookie worthy. Yeah, that's a really good message to share with students. And that was something that I struggled with, was realizing that it's okay to switch ideas, switch what you think of, and to change your career, I guess, maybe as you're going through it. So hearing examples, hearing stories like yours is always really good for students as they consider their own careers. And to definitely agree with your sentiment about following your heart, but it's okay if it changes, and it's okay if things happen. Sometimes you get a random email in your mailbox saying, hey, you want to come work at the CLS? And who knows? So with that, just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your school day to meet and to share your story and experience working with the education team. We really, really appreciate it. And talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.